Okay, so before I go into too much detail here, before I go any further, I want to make sure I can kind of remove a stumbling block that I pretty much know is in a lot of people's way here. A lot of people have the scripture come into their head right now. Isn't the book of the law a witness against us? Why, what does that mean anyways? What does that mean it's a witness against us? So let's go ahead and talk just real briefly about this. We'll get into a lot more detail into what this is talking about, and we'll even get into some of Paul's commentary on the Torah when we're talking about Paul in a later video, talking about how the deal was nailed to a cross, and we're going to see exactly what in the world's going on with all that stuff. But we'll get into that later. But first, I want to talk about this, the book of the law, a witness against thee. So the first thing we need to be aware of is that the Torah was not only written for the tribe of Judah, but for the other 11 tribes as well. Sure, the Jews may be the only ones you've noticed nowadays that are attempting to keep the Torah, but it was really written for the whole nation of Israel. In fact, it was meant for anyone who desires to know who the true almighty creator of the universe is and what his standards of righteousness are. So if you want to walk after the footsteps of the Messiah, and you also desire to know the true will of God, and you long to learn his own written definition of righteousness rather than just guessing or asking other people, if you want to know his definition of righteousness, you can explore the scriptures to find out, starting with the schoolmaster, the Torah. The last thing we want to do is leave it up to our own crazy, twisted, lustful imaginations of what we think God would say, especially when it's all written down for us, so we don't have to be guessing. Or even worse, we don't want to ask some rookie preacher straight out of some cookie-cutter seminary that's designed to toot its own denomination's little horn. You know, that building technique would result in a less than solid foundation for us to build our house upon. Okay. We already covered the 10 commandments in pretty fair detail. So what about these other commandments we see written down in the scriptures? Are Christians really still meant to keep the same dietary laws that Jesus did? I mean, what about the religious ceremonial laws we see that Israel kept? Are we Christians required to observe Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the Feast of the First Fruits? I mean, after all, they were fulfilled when Messiah was crucified, died, and was buried, and when he rose again from the dead on the third day. Well, what about the other ceremonial laws? I mean, how far are we supposed to go with all this anyways? Are we supposed to, kill a critter and make this burnt offering every morning and evening, or what? I thought all this stuff is gone, and now we keep the Feast of Ishtar and celebrate the birthday of Tammuz on December 25th every year now instead. What about all the other crazy stuff we're told to do in the Torah? Are we really supposed to stone people and wear blue dangly things from our robes? Well, soon we'll find out about all that. Let us first go through all of this thoroughly and at least see what it really is that the Torah actually instructs us to do and what the reasons are. Let's at least give it a fair chance to explain itself before we rush to judgment and tear out the first 5 books of our Bibles. I mean, if nothing else, we will at least have greater understanding of the history and culture of Israel. I think we can all agree that knowledge of the scriptures is never a bad thing. So let's give it a chance and see what purpose of these various laws are. And then we'll at least have better footing to stand on when we try to see if any of it may still be relevant to us today. When we are all through, we will know whether or not Messiah in the New Testament indicates whether we should continue to observe these various practices or not. I mean, he specifically told us exactly if we're supposed to keep them or not, and we'll find that out before we're done. We'll even examine the highly controversial words of Paul in his letter to some Colossian guys back in the day and see what he had to say about all this. For all you Paul lovers and all you Paul haters out there, the answer may surprise you both. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go through all of the 613 commandments, like I said before. So let's take another look at some of the real obvious ones, just to get another taste of some of the things that the Bible instructs. Then I think we'll have a way better idea, at least what some of these laws are. And it'll be obvious that obviously there's still some merit to these things. And we'll be able to better judge whether they apply to us, like we said before. So here's the greater context of the story in order to find out why it might be said that the book of the law could be called a witness against us. Okay, so real quick here. Now, after God led his people out of Egypt and drowned Pharaoh's army under the Gulf of Aqaba, the nation of Israel set up camp under Mount Sinai. Or on the maps, you can find it in Saudi Arabia called Jabal al-Lawz, the Mountain of Laws. That's in modern-day Saudi Arabia now. Not the traditional site, but the actual historical archaeological site. This is where Yahovah spoke down the 10 commandments to the entire nation of Israel and later wrote them in stone so no one would have any excuses to forget them later. But what happened almost instantly? They went and dug up all their old sun worship accessories that they got from Egypt and thought it would be fun to go and make up their own holiday in the name of God, and they committed idolatry against him almost instantly. Not a good idea, it turned out. It immediately cost them thousands of lives and also 40 years of wandering around the desert to where that generation never even made it into the promised land. It was after this, and many other blunders to come, that God had to spell out his law in much greater detail, because Israel obviously needed every little detail explained to them at great length. Hence, we have been given the 613 commandments instead of just the 10. Now think about this. If Israel would have been in touch with the full heart of the first 10 commandments from the get-go, they never would have concluded that it was a good idea to mix a bunch of pagan sun gods and perverted sun worship ceremonies in with the name of Yahovah. It was only because of their blatant inability to seriously understand the first 10 commandments that God had to spell it out in every little detail to where they could not twist the law to suit such terrible perversions anymore. So now we can start to understand this quote from Deuteronomy chapter 31 concerning the really pathetic situation. So Deuteronomy 31 is where I'm reading from here. And it came to pass when Moses made an end of the writings, the words of this law in a book, until they were finished, that Moses commanded the Levites, which bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, saying, Take this book of the law, and put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against thee. For I know thy rebellion and thy stiff neck. Behold, while I am yet alive with you this day, ye have been rebellious against the Lord, and how much more after my death? Gather unto me all the elders of your tribes and your officers, that I may speak these words in their ears, and call heaven and earth to record against them. For I know that after my death ye will utterly corrupt yourselves, and turn aside from the way I have commanded you. The evil will befall you in the latter days, because ye will do evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands. That's pretty much still us today, by the way. You know, God having Moses issue out this super detailed explanation of all the obvious details of the law to us stiff-necked, rebellious, sun worship happy goofballs, that was really a witness against us. We obviously could not figure out what keeping the simple first 10 commandments entailed, so we had to get the big list, explaining all the obvious little fine details. No, do not smite your father or your mother. No, you absolutely cannot commit sodomy with your father. No, it is not a good idea to take revenge on folks. No, you shouldn't be bearing a grudge. No, do not commit incest with your mother. Do not indulge in evil thoughts and sights. I mean, this is all stuff we can agree upon so far, yes? I mean, seems a little bit obvious, you think? Now you can see why having to give us these rules may be considered a witness against us. If we have to be specifically told not to do stuff like this, we must be really far gone from all that time we spent in Egypt, you know what I mean? I mean, this is what it means that the book of the law was a witness against us. This is exactly what it's talking about. So now that we are saved, now we can go and do all this stuff now. I mean, these rules have been nailed to the cross, right? Well, we'll get into that more later when we look more closely into Paul's commentary. But I just wanted to quickly address why the fact God had to specify and address each of these seemingly obvious details in the book of the law can be considered quite a witness against us. Hopefully now this statement makes a little more sense.